The London Underground is a vital part of London. Every day, over 3 million people make their way into the underground tunnels and passageways without a second thought. Most of them travel completely unaware of the history of their surroundings. From the early days of construction through to wartime, there have been thousands of accidental deaths and suicides. Add these to the graves, cemeteries, plague pits and church crypts that the tube's construction has disrupted over the years, and the number of potentially disturbed souls begins to add up to the thousands. This is a journey through the oldest underground network in the world. For the first time ever, men who actually work on the tube have shared their stories. These previously untold experiences will reveal just how haunted the tube really is.
You could hear the doors 1, 2, 3, clunk, click.
I know that I did see this image of a woman.
And all I could do was just sit and look.
It's a little unnerving.
To this day, I can't forget it.
The rhythm of the tube's daily life rarely changes. Before the tube shuts for the night, commuters make their way home in various states, all desperately trying to make sure they catch the last train. Because if it left without them, they would experience a very different place than the one they're used to. The crowds would be gone, replaced by silent, empty and lonely stations and passageways. 24 hours a day, the CCTV from every station in London is monitored by a line controller based in a separate location. In the summer of 2000, the line controller noticed a man standing on a platform at Liverpool Street in central London. This was particularly unusual as it was 2 o'clock in the morning. The station was closed and there were no contractors scheduled to be there. On shift that night was Steve Coates, a station supervisor with 23 years of experience. The line controller rang Steve and asked him to investigate.
I asked him if he'd like me to go and have a look. He said he would, as he'd seen somebody wearing white overalls standing in the entrance to the eastbound tunnel. I went down to the central line. I couldn't see anybody as I approached the eastbound tunnel. There was nobody there. I looked into the tunnel, I looked all around. There was nobody present. I walked through to the bottom of the escalators and used the telephone to call the line controller, and I explained to him that I'd carried out an investigation. I'd looked through into the tunnel. I couldn't see anybody there. He said, "But this guy was next to you. How could you not see him?" So I said, "Okay, I'll go back and have another look." So I walked through, I looked all around there. Again, I saw nobody. I came back to the telephone, called the line controller and said, "There honestly is nobody here. I've looked around." And he said, "But I'm telling you, I can see you on my CCTV. You were standing right next to him." I said, "Are you sure it's not just a blip on your CCTV?" And he said, "No, the guy was right next to you." And I said, "I can promise you there was nobody there." So he said, "Okay, all right, fine, thanks very much." As I turned and walked back onto the eastbound platform, to my left there was a bench, and on that bench was a white pair of paper overalls. At the time, it made a chill go down my spine. Had anybody walked out of the tunnel while I was on the telephone, I would have seen them. They would have passed the area that I was in. And I certainly did not see anybody wearing white overalls or see anybody placing any overalls on that bench.
From Liverpool Street, if you travel one stop westbound along the Central Line, you arrive at Bank. It's one of the oldest stations on the network and is situated in the heart of London's financial district. Andy Harkness worked for London Underground for 35 years. In 1982, he was working the night shift at Bank. The last train had left, and he'd just begun locking up the station.
I then went down the other lifts, 4, 3, 2, 1. I had a look in number 1, although we hadn't even used the lift. And bearing in mind,
These are the old lifts with the old wooden heavy doors. So I looked in the lift, nobody in there, it was clean, shut it down. As I walk across, about 6 foot away from the number 1 lift, there was a knock, 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 knock on the door. And I thought, nah, that's not true, because I've just looked in there, there's nobody there, there's nobody else in there with me, there was no wind, you know, occasionally you could hear these doors rattle, but it wasn't, it was a definite knock, knock, knock. So I thought, nah, this is not happening, so I carried on, ignore it, you know, go away, I'm saying to myself. I walk across then to where the switch room is, I open the switch room, and I wedge open the door and switch the lights off to the old just left on the emergency lights, and I've started to walk across the ticket hall. As I walk across, all of a sudden that door slams, wham, like that, and I wouldn't even look back. There was no wind, no nothing, and it scared the life out of me, and I said, no, it's not happening, like, and I nearly made a mess in my trousers, and off I went, you know. And that was the last time I was working on that side of the station, and I was glad I never went back.
Incidents like these at Liverpool Street and Bank are fairly few and far between. But the reality is, they're not.
What would a spirit like that be doing down in the London Underground?
It's a strange sort of feeling when something like that happens, especially like if you just don't believe in it.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Although 1 billion passengers pass through the 253 stations of the London Underground each year, there are still places where passengers never go. One such place is Kennington Loop, a section of track near Kennington Station in South London, where there have been more reported unexplainable incidents than anywhere else on the network. The loop is there to enable trains to turn around and head back north again. At Kennington, the carriages are cleared of any passengers, and the empty trains are sent into the loop, where they will often have to wait for up to 20 minutes in the 150-year-old tunnels. And while they're waiting, there is absolutely no way anybody could get on or off the train. Larry de Larrabiti and Bob Cairn both worked on the Northern Line. Bob was a driver and Larry was a guard. Together they have nearly 50 years of experience on the tube, and they both have extensive experience of travelling through Kennington Loop.
25 years ago, I was a guard on the Northern Line. One day, we were contacted by the line controller, and he asked us, because of an incident further up the line, to divert to Kennington Loop.
We detrain passengers at Kennington on the southbound, and then we move off and wait in the loop for the signal to come northbound, which normally, that particular night, it was sort of 10 minutes.
We were there for quite a while, about 5 minutes or so, which seems quite a long time when you're held there with nothing moving, when I heard the interconnecting car doors going. Now this is a unique, distinctive sound. Like the clunk click of the doors is unlike any other on the Underground.
I heard the slamming of our communicating doors, which are the doors in the middle of the train.
You could hear the doors 1, 2, 3, clunk click, again car 5, 6, 7.
It got closer and closer, and I thought, well, this is strange.
And so I stood up to look into the next car to expect to see my driver there, but nobody was there.
And we actually searched the train through all the communicating doors. Half the doors were open, but nobody there.
You just think, how strange.
It happened a few times, apparently. The story goes that some passenger was killed in the loop.
A man was killed at Kennington trying to board the train in between the cars, and as a result was apparently dragged into the sidings and was killed.
221 feet below London. The unique tunnels of the London Underground put passengers in an environment that they would never usually find themselves in. Could this have anything to do with the high number of strange experiences reported? Vic Tandy is a senior lecturer at Coventry University. He's been exploring the reasons and explanations behind paranormal experiences for over 20 years. He believes he has a simple explanation as to why there are so many unexplainable experiences on the underground.
Most humans can hear between 20 hertz, that's 20 cycles per second, up to about 20,000. Infrasound then starts at 20 hertz and goes down. The effects of infrasound are that they can activate the fight or flight mechanism, which makes you feel cold, it makes the hairs stand up on the back of your neck, and so the whole system gets worse and worse, and if you do nothing about it, that in itself will cause visual disturbances, and you may see grey objects in your peripheral vision.
To prove his theory, Vic would first need to find significant levels of infrasound in the parts of the tube where strange experiences had taken place.
The microphone just works in the same way as a standard microphone. The only difference is that this one is very sensitive to low frequencies.
The first place he went to make some recordings was on the Northern Line at Kennington Loop.
This is Kennington Loop, and so this is where the trains actually come in and then they turn around and go back out again. And so one of the stories involves people having strange feelings in here, and so we're measuring the level of infrasound actually in the tunnel as we go round the loop. There's actually quite high levels of infrasound showing on the trace. I want to actually stop it and analyse it and get a closer look. But certainly, again, I think there's quite remarkable levels apparently. So it'd be interesting to spend a few minutes looking at it more closely. Certainly at the point at which the train was stationary, for some reason, the level of infrasound became quite high. So we were talking about 90 decibels. In fact, at one point I've measured 95 decibels. Now, if that was audible sound, that would be a disco which would be just about as loud as you could possibly stand it. You would come away from that with your ears ringing. Clearly it's not going to cause doors to bang and that sort of thing, but it might just be responsible for feelings of unease, which then other events might be more likely to sort of give a paranormal feel to.
Much of the noise generated on the underground is made by the machines and motors that run constantly during the passenger hours, providing services that have become second nature to commuters, such as the 408 escalators and lifts in operation at any one time all over the network. At night, when the last train has left, it's the responsibility of the station staff to ensure that these are switched off and the silent hours of the night begin.